Welcome back to Books with Brandywine. Today I wanted to share with you some more of the progress that I've made through the Queendom for the Book Junkie Trials. There were 4 different paths, if you remember, which were a total of 17 books. And so for the Mage path, I followed 5 books. And each path is 5 books, but the 5th book is the same for all of the paths. So now that I'm done with the Mage path of 5 books, the other 3 paths are just 4 books each, which leaves me with 12 books. And I have finished the next 4 books in the path, which was, I believe, the Outlaw path. And then for the next 2 paths, I'm actually going to be combining them, so I'm zigzagging across the country, so that the very last book that I read is the Squid, which is the book that is the most intimidating to me. And instead of going like down and then back up, which would put the Squid in the middle, no matter which way I go, it would be in the middle. So I'm going to zigzag back and forth so that it is at the very end. So for this path, I read 4 books. I read Kitchen Princess, I read Mr. Lemoncello's All-Star Breakout Game, Princess Academy, and Ella Enchanted. So Kitchen Princess was for Weeping Falls, which was to read a book that is a tearjerker. This is an omnibus. I think it had 3 volumes in this one. Yep, it had 5, 6, and 7. And I believe there is one more omnibus after this, and that is for 8, 9, and 10. This manga did have the scene in it that I thought it would have that would make me cry. I was really surprised when that scene actually happened. I didn't cry, but the aftermath of the scene did make me cry. So it did fall into that category. It did achieve what it was supposed to achieve. I liked this one a little bit better than some of the other ones just because the bullying is less of a main storyline in this one than it was in the previous ones. Some of the kids at the school are still being really mean to her, but they're failing every time they try. So, which I love. And, so the storyline of her with the 2 boys and then with her family that's back at the orphanage. Well, I say family, but they're family to her. And all of that is still going on in the storyline. This one does have a lot more emphasis on cooking, I felt like, because she does end up having a couple, at least 2, maybe 3 cooking competitions in this book. So this one does have a lot more cooking in it. It has a lot of recipes, of course, in it. One of my favorite recipes from the specific volume that I was really looking forward to reading about was the Madeleines, I think is what they're called, which are these little French, like, I think they're cookies, but they're really soft. They're like cakes, and they're shaped like a shell. And there's a story in here where she ends up having to make them for a competition. And I love her describing the process of how she made them, because she made each one slightly different. And so I really enjoyed it. I still loved it as much as I loved the other 2. And I'm looking forward to reading that last volume and finding out what happens, because I don't remember how the series ends. Like, I think I can only remember 1 volume past what happens in these books. So I'm really, in this volume. 1 volume past what happens in this omnibus. So I'm wondering if I never finished it. But the 4th volume isn't available at my local bookstore where I bought the other 3 volumes. So I'm going to have to go online and get it. The next one was for the Forgotten Forest, and that was to read a book that is the next in a series. And for that, I read Mr. Lemoncello's All-Star Breakout Game. I really, really enjoyed this book. So, something weird happened. So, I think 1 or 2 years ago, it was, the movie Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library came out. And as far as I knew, the movie was supposed to be based on the first book. And I watched the movie, and I enjoyed the movie, but it was nothing like the book. Like, it had some character names, and it took place in a library, and that was pretty much it. And I still loved it, but it really bugged me that it didn't fit what I remembered of the book. Now, admittedly, I read that first book, like, years ago. So I watched the movie just, like, 3 days ago, and then I read the book, the 4th book in the series. And there was stuff that was in the movie that was in this book. And it was the stuff that bothered me being in the movie because it wasn't in the first book. So now I have to go back and read the first book, which, I mean, I was planning to anyway because I wanted to reread the series. But I have to read the first book and be like, okay, was that stuff in the first book and I just didn't remember? Or was, like, is it only in the movie and it didn't come out until this book? And I'm like, okay, so did he, like, know what was going to be in the movie and was like, that sounds really cool, I'm going to put that in a book and make it even better? Or was it, like, they asked him stuff that was going to be in the books, and he was like, oh yeah, that's coming up in the 4th book, you might as well put it in the movie? And so now I'm really, really confused. So now I have to go back and reread the series and rewatch the movie while it's still on Hulu and figure things out. Because I'm, like, so confused right now, and I feel like it won't make sense until I've reread the series. Which is fine, because it's an awesome series, and I think we should all read it anyway. As far as this book goes, I really, really enjoyed it. This book is basically I guess it's like escape room, but with fiction genres and stuff. And so the All-Star Breakout game is a new game show that's going to be on the Kidapalooza channel. It's going to be a game show that's on TV. And they pick 2 teams from the town, and they're going to compete against each other, and whoever gets out of the library first, because it is going to be an escape again, is going to get to have their own TV show. And this time they're working in teams, and the escape rooms that they have to go through are based on different genres. So there's, like, a comic book room, there's a horror room, there's a history room, there's a fantasy room, stuff like that. And they have, like, it's an interactive AR. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Okay, so I don't know where it is, but one of the things that I absolutely loved, it, like, cracked me up, was that in this book, they have Lemoncello Go, I think is what it is called. And I was like, wait, as in, like, Pokemon Go? And so when they first mentioned the AR, like, that was the first thing I had thought of, was Pokemon Go. And I play Wizards Unite all the time. Okay, I don't know where it is, but it's in here somewhere. But, I play Wizards Unite, and I play Pokemon Go, and both of them are these AR games on your phone. And so in here they mentioned that they had a Lemoncello Go, where they had to run around town using the AR to capture monsters. And I was like, it's Pokemon Go right there. And so I thought it was kind of cool because it's incorporating, like, things that are actually going on, like, in our world right now and are, like, up to date with the kids, and it's incorporated in the book. Another thing that they had in here that I thought was really funny is, if you remember, like, one of the things I loved about these books is that it includes, like, mentions of all of these other books and all these authors and all these people in history, and I love going through and finding all of those references. This book references Dr. Libris Island, which is in the back of my bookshelf, so I'm not going to grab it right now. But that's actually another book that is written by Chris Grabenstein. And so I thought that was so funny because I was like, or Grabenstein? Because I thought that was so funny, and I was like, hey, it's his book, and he's referencing it in his book. So, technically that means that the book Dr. Libris, like, the book itself, is, this is a world where that book exists, if that makes sense, which I think is just hilarious. And there was something else that I thought was really hilarious about this, and I cannot remember what it is now, off the top of my head, but I was just like, this is so awesome. But yeah, so this one was just as much fun as the previous 3 books in the series. I definitely would recommend you guys read this series. If you haven't picked it up yet, like, go pick it up. It's just fun. It's getting to be in a really cool, fun library that we probably won't get for, like, another 20 years because it's so advanced. But it's awesome. I loved it. Very good use of AR in this game. Or in this book. So the next book I read was Princess Academy, and that was for the Queendom Stone. And that was to read a book that features royalty. This book is about this girl here, and her name is Miri, which she's named after a pink flower that grows on the mountain that she grew up on. And basically, every generation, when the prince comes of age to marry, this council gets together and they do fortune telling or something, I don't know, but they predict where the princess that he's going to marry is going to come from, and it's going to come from, like, some town or whatever in the country. And usually the area that's chosen has nobles, and they can just pick from any of the noble daughters. They create this thing called the Princess Academy, which is usually just a formality. The girls socialize for a few days before the ball, where the prince picks who he's going to marry. But this time, when they chose where the girl was going to come from, they chose Mount Eskel, which, I think that's how it's pronounced, Eskel, which is a huge mountain that has a town of people that move from quarry to quarry because they mine, is that the right word? The rock that is in this mountain, which is called Linder, which I kind of imagined it being like marble. I tried to look it up and see if it was a real thing, but I couldn't find it. But in my mind, I just imagined it looking like marble. And they've been mining this rock for so many generations that as each quarry empties, they move their town into that quarry, and then they start a new quarry, and the rock looks slightly different depending on where on the mountain they take it from. And so this town is very, very much like a mountain town. They're a very small, tight-knit community, and they see everybody else in the country as lowlanders because they're low. They're like not high on the mountain. And the lowlanders see them as being less than servants because they don't consider them actual like Danlanders, I think is what they call the country. And so when they find out that the next princess is going to come from this town, they create a princess academy, and for a year, all the girls between age 12 and 17 are sent to this academy to try and prepare them to meet the prince so he can decide which of the girls he's going to marry. And they have to study things like poise and conversation and commerce and reading, because nobody in the village can read because it's never been something that they've really needed. And so the whole story is from her point of view, and it follows her growth as she's in this academy for a year, as she's discovering more about who she is, more about her place in the town and her place in her family. I loved this book. Oh, it did feature the prince. He popped in a couple times, so I guess that meets the royalty requirement. But I really loved this book. This is the first book that I've ever read by Shannon Hale. I have been wanting to read her books for a while. For Christmas, I received Goose Girl, which takes place in the same world, but in a different country and a different time. And so I've been wanting to read Shannon Hale for a while. I've been hearing about her for a while. People always put her up there with Gail, Carson, Levine. And oh my gosh, I loved this book. I cried like 3 times because there is bullying in this book. This was like the week of bullying. It was really bad. There was bullying in this book. So I cried about that. I cried about how unfair some of the people were. I cried about like daddy-daughter moments because those always get me. Like any moments of like dads and their kids and revelations being made, like I'm bawling every time. And so I definitely cried a few times. This book was an emotional roller coaster for me, but I loved it. I loved how it ended. To me, it ended so perfectly because the whole time I was going like, I could not figure out how it was going to end. I was like, how can like these things be reconciled? Like, I don't get it, but I loved how it ended. There is a very minor like romance plot between her and Peter, who is another boy that grew up in the village with her, and they were best friends their entire life, and she's realizing she's in love with him, but at the same time she's trying to win to marry the prince, and so there's conflict there, but it is a very minor like secondary storyline. It's more just showing her growth through the story as she's realizing where her priorities are and everything. I would recommend this book to like anyone that loves fantasy books, anyone that loves fairy tales, anyone that loves learning about cool, like it wasn't magic, but I'm going to call it magic for lack of a better word, but like a cool, well, it's not magic, but it's not superpowers. I don't know how to describe the Corey speak, but yeah. It's just, go read this book. And then the very last book that I read for this path that I took was Ella Enchanted. And this was at Crimson Peak. And it was to keep the volcano from erupting, reread a favorite book. And Ella Enchanted by Gail, Carson, Levine is definitely one of my all-time favorite books. I have not read this book, though, in like, I want to say at least 12 years. It could be longer than that. I know for sure I had read it before my sophomore year of high school, but I don't remember how much before that. I had forgotten a lot of this book. I only remembered one scene in this entire book, and I didn't even fully remember that scene. I had forgotten how horrible of a person her dad was. I had forgotten a lot of the hardships that she went through. I did remember her time at the finishing school, and I was reading it, and I could not wait to get past that, because she does end up going on an adventure, and I was really, really looking forward to the adventure. I love this book that she has in here. This is a gift that she gets, and it's a fairy book, and they didn't really explain exactly what it does, because it doesn't necessarily show you what you want to see, but it shows you what you need to see, I guess, to understand what's going on and things that specifically affect whoever's reading it. But at the same time, if like somebody who's not supposed to be reading it reads it, all they see is like an instruction manual. And so, like it's, I don't know, it really reads it well. I did like all of the fantasy creatures that were involved. Dragons were mentioned and stuff. And, you know, it's weird because we have zoos, and I'm used to having zoos. I love zoos. I love to take my son so he can see all the different animals. But they have a zoo in this book, and it's a zoo of, like, all the fantasy creatures. And for some reason, that really bothered me. The thought of a dragon being in a zoo, even a baby dragon, like, on display, and not being properly cared for. I mean, I guess they really cared for it, but not being, like, bonded to someone. I don't know. And then the centaurs in these books are really, really dumb. Like, really dumb. Like, I guess she was kind of equating them to horses, but I feel like they were even dumber than horses, because I feel like horses have some intelligence, and the centaurs in these books have absolutely none. And then there's even an ogre that's in the zoo, and the ogres are super intelligent. They're just as sentient as humans, and in fact, they use their talents to lure humans and eat them. So it felt weird to me, too, to have a sentient being in a zoo. And I don't know, the zoo just felt really weird to me. But I did love the rest of the book. I loved the elves. I loved, they make these really cool pottery that you'll just have to read to understand. I know this book is like a total favorite among a lot of people, and I still love it. But in all honesty, I think I liked the Shannon Hale book that I read a lot better. This book didn't take me on the emotional roller coaster that I was expecting, which I was glad about, because I did not want another emotional roller coaster. I did love how she incorporated the story of Cinderella, because Ella Enchanted is a retelling of Cinderella. Ella is under a curse to force her to be obedient, which is like the main conflict throughout the story. But I did love how they incorporated Cinderella. I loved how they incorporated the glass slippers, and how she had the balls, and how she had her being like a servant to her family, and the stepsisters and the stepmother. So I loved that, and I still really, really love this book. I don't think it is any longer one of my absolute favorites, but it is still a favorite, and it is still a book that I plan on rereading, and I cannot wait to read Ogre Enchanted, which is like not exactly a sequel, but it's like, I think it's like a prequel or something. But I definitely want to read that. It made me want to reread Ferris, which is a sequel to this book, and it involves her best friend that is in this book, and it is based off of Snow White. And like, I still loved it. I did. Like I said, it's not my absolute favorite anymore, but I still really, really enjoyed this book, and I'm still really, really glad I got to read it, and I'm looking forward to getting to read it more. I really am, because I want to see if there's more stuff that I missed in reading it. So those are the 4 books that I read for this portion of the journey. That leaves me with 8 books to still read as part of the Book Junkie Trials, and I'm determined to read those before the end of the month so that I can achieve quest completion and quest champion. Is that what it is? I don't remember what it is, what you get when you get all of the books, but I am determined to. So anyway, I will see you guys next time. Bye!